Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Hafiz here. And today I'm gonna be telling you guys about the Eastern Front of the World War II. I gotta alert you guys though, this story thing I'm gonna be telling you about is gonna full of inaccuracies in here. So let's just start it. Anyway, if you guys can tell me about the war or another historical lessons, maybe you guys can tell me about if you can meet me later. Okay, let's just start it, shall we? The Eastern Front of the World War II, or something that people actually know as the Great Patriotic War, began in the late summer of the 1941, when the German troops were advancing to the eastern part of the Europe itself to conquer the Union Soviet and its allies itself, or the occupied land itself. And with whopping 30 million men, the hope of the Soviet Union itself seemed lost because they were not prepared apparently. And you might be thinking at this point, oh, that's just ridiculous. If there were around 30 million people around there, how could anyone stop this pest? The answer is, well, no one. No one was actually able to stop these people because their lack of manpower, functioning vehicles, and clear water and clear food as well. So there were just too many problems for them. And a lot of people just have been telling me that they were actually stopped at this point around the October to the first few months of the 1942. And you might be thinking why. Well, my friends, it was actually the Mother Nature itself that did the job. They were actually stopped by the winter itself. And it was because they were not prepared of it. Because you see, the evil mastermind, known as the Hitler, was actually planning to conquer the eastern part of the Europe before the winter set in. But no, they didn't. The heart of Mother Russia is just heartbroken, I see. Okay, long story short, after a few months in the part of the war, things were happening normally in the Great Patriotic War thing that I'm talking about. And what do I mean by that? Well, the German troops become more and more bloodthirsty, while the allies of it, I mean by Italy, Romania, and Greece, was actually helping them, including the neutral Spanish too. And they are even more bloodthirsty. And you might be thinking, why? Because at some point they were actually using drugs. Yeah, fun fact actually. And with the very few command, because the commander at the start of war actually either killed, prison, or just gone away. Waiting for a command is pretty damn hard. And there are many, even more soldiers that were actually refusing to do it because they just couldn't do it. Because, most of them are just plenty of new soldiers. And doing the command itself is actually hard for them to believe they have to do it. So they just refuse to do it, and thus making the hope of winning the war for the Soviet Union even more and more seemed lost. Okay, back to the story itself. As the Germans become closer and closer to the city of Stalingrad and Leningrad, the Wehrmacht troops were actually focusing more on the city called Caucasus. And you might be thinking, why? It's because Caucasus is the land full of oil, and because there are so many factories that are producing millions tons of tanks, planes, and etc. They actually had a problem with it. They needed oil as the fuel to use the vehicles itself. They didn't actually have the problem with iron or copper itself because they have actually conquered the Denmark instead of war, and they just need to conquer the city of Caucasus itself. And unfortunately for them, they failed. Luckily for us. Well, it seemed the enemies of them, and I mean by Spanish and the German itself, was getting more and more exhausted by the war. The Allies' power, and I mean United States, Britain, and USSR, was actually getting more and more power from the land and resources they used. Slowly, but the most, Russia was finally able to free its claimed land, and I mean by that is claimed land from the Finland, the Stalingrad and Leningrad, and there are even more cities that were actually free by them. And now, after a few months of the war, slowly but the most of course, they actually able to free all of its land in just, I don't know, 6 months maybe. It was actually astonishingly good for them. After they reoccupied the land that they actually owned by themselves, they decided to not just take their own land and decided to uh, destroy the Third Reich itself. Third Reich. And I know that by the Nazis. So they actually pushed more and more to the west, part of the Europe itself to end the Nazi regime. So they did, and it was astonishingly effective. But they didn't find anything except the, camps where Jewish people were actually tortured, and many even more debris, and anything that was left behind was just debris and dead people. And it was, dare I say, brutal, even for a war crime or war. And with the Russia and the Allies getting more and more bloodthirsty, and with the Axis power cannot handle the power of them, Italia started to retreat in 1943. And while the Germans actually started to fighting back, and it was pretty darn good. Hope seemed lost again for them, because at the battle after battle, they are just, could not capable of fighting back their enemies. They were poor equipped with the weapon that were actually recycled, and they are not hope to get back after they fought. And that's it. Battle after battle began, and most of them are probably won by the Allies power itself. And finally, after battle of Berlin, they finally won. I mean, the Allies won. Thus, it ends the war in the Europe itself, and done. Okay, a few months later, the United States of America dropped 2 of the bomb atoms at Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and thus ending the war in the Pacific. And that's the end of the World War II and my story as well. Thank you guys for listening to me for a few minutes here. I hope to meet you again soon and see you again later, guys. Bye.